Hey, what's up, everybody? We're going to start out like a new little, series of videos here about quadratic equations. So we're going to be looking at quadratic equations and complex numbers. But in this first video, I want to show you a few different ways that you can solve quadratic equations. Let's take a look at those. So we have three different ways that we can do it that we're going to experiment with in this video. So first of all, we can use graphing. So if we graph a quadratic function, we're going to get some kind of parabola, and wherever it crosses the x-axis, those are going to be our solutions for our quadratic function. We can also use square roots. So the main idea here is that if we can get like the unknown on one side as just like x squared or y squared or whatever it is, and the other constant number on the other side. So we have our unknown on the left and then our constant number on the right. And we could just take the square root of both sides and that would solve it. We can't always do that, but if we can, I'll show you some examples of that here in a minute. We can also use factoring. So you may remember from your Algebra 1 how to factor a quadratic equation. So if we factor it and set it equal to 0, then we can use this zero product property to solve for it. So let's see what that zero product property means. That means that if you have two things multiplied by each other and it equals 0, then one of those things has to be equal to 0. So for example, if we have a times b equals 0 here, then either a has to be 0 or b has to equal 0, because for us to get 0 when we multiply, one of them has to be 0, because 0 times anything is 0. So that's kind of the zero product property. So I'll show you how to use that as well. So let's go to the first one and let's look at graphing. I'm not going to do all these. I'll leave one or two for you to experiment with. But let's take this first one. So we can graph this equation and see where it crosses the x-axis, and that's where we're going to have a solution. So we're going to pull up Desmos here, and let me remember what this is. X squared minus 11x plus 24. So let's do x squared. I see, I already forgot what it was. Minus 11x plus 24. And we can see, okay, it crosses at 3 and at 8. So our solutions for this quadratic equation are 3, x equals 3, and x equals 8. So we can go back to that and write our solutions in here, x. And you'll have to forgive my handwriting. I'm using a mouse, and I'm not very used to this. So anyway, just bear with me here. So 3 and 8. So x equals 3, and x equals 8. Now, most of the time with our quadratic functions, our quadratic equations, we're going to get two answers. We can see though sometimes we'll get only one answer, and sometimes we'll get no answer. But most of the time we'll get two. So that's how you do that. Pretty straightforward. You just plug it into Desmos or into your graphing calculator. Figure out where it crosses the x-axis. So here's the x-axis right here. Wherever it crosses the x-axis, that is where you're going to have your answers. So x equals 3 and x equals 8. All right, let's take a look at our other method. And I'll leave numbers 2 and 3 here for y'all to try out on your own and see what you get there. All right, this next method, we're going to use square roots. So let's see. I guess we can solve one of the more difficult ones. Let's do number 5, and I'll leave number 4 and 6 for y'all. So we want to get the squared by itself on one side. So let's take that negative 19 and let's add it to the right. So we'll have 2k plus 3 squared equals 81 plus 19 is 100. Again, guys, just forgive my handwriting here. Okay, then we can take the square root of both sides. But when we do that, remember when you take the square root of a number, it can become positive or negative. So really we'll get two equations. Our first equation will be 2k plus 3. So when we take the square root of that, it removes the squared. Equals square root of 100 is 10, but it could also be negative 10. So we'll solve that other case here in a minute. So we can subtract the 3, so we'll get 2k equals 10 minus 3 is 7. And then we can divide by 2, so k equals 7 halves. All right, that's one answer. The other answer would be when we take that square root, we would get 2k plus 3 equals negative 10. And then we just solve this out. So we subtract the 3, we'll get 2k equals negative 13. Divide by 2, and we get negative 13 halves. So there you go. Our two answers are 7 halves and negative 13 halves. So that's kind of the main idea there. You're just trying to isolate the squared on one side and then take the square root of both sides, and you'll get two answers again. Most of the time you'll get two answers. So we got two answers for this one. So try number 4 and number 6 on your own and see what you get. All right, let's look at one last method here. So we'll solve this equation by factoring, and you may remember how to do that. So let's do one again. Let's do number 8, and then I'll leave 7 and 9 for y'all. When we do factoring, we need to set one side equal to 0, so we need to get everything else on the other side. So what we could do is we could bring this 14x and this 40 over to the left side, and then we would just have 0 on the right side. So this equation will become x squared. Bring the 14x over here, so we'll have negative 14x. And this negative 40 we'll bring over here, so we'll have positive 40. All right, let me turn this arrow off real quick. All right, so, and then equals 0. So for factoring, you're going to bring everything over to 0 so that we can use that 0 property, that 0 product property. Okay, now we can factor this this quadratic equation over here on the left side, this quadratic expression. So remember how we can do this. There's probably different ways of doing this, but we can just kind of, I like kind of the trial and error method to start with, see if we can figure it out. All right, so we'll have an x on the left side for both of them. So x times x is x squared. This is a positive, so you always look at this sign over here. Since that's a positive, that means that we're going to have the same sign for both of our expressions here, so or both of our products here. So since this is a positive, they're both going to be the same, and they're going to be the same as this sign over here. So we're going to have two negatives. Now, if this was a negative over here, then we would have a plus and a minus. But since this is a positive, we're going to have the same sign for both of them, and it's going to be the same as this one. Okay, and then what times what equals 40? And we can see, oh, 4 times 10 equals 40. But we have to check it because the 4, we have to take this number and add it to this number, and it has to get that middle number. Otherwise, we have to try a different product. So 4 times 10 is 40. But when we add these two, negative 4 and negative 10, we have to get negative 14. And we can see in this case, we did. And of course, I saw that coming. So that's what we did there. So you just kind of have to play around with it. So 40 times 1 also equals 40. But we couldn't do a 40 and a 1 because negative 40 plus negative 1 would be negative 41, which is not negative 14. So you just have, and 8 times 5 is kind of the same thing. 8 times 5 equals 40, but negative 8 plus negative 5 equals negative 13, not negative 14. So you have to find two products that are, when you multiply them together, um, you get the number, but also when you add them, you get the middle number. Okay, so we know because the zero product property that one of these two expressions has to equal 0. So we can set them both equal to 0 individually to get our two answers. So we'll have an x minus 4 equals 0, which we can see real quick. That solves out. If we add the 4 over, then we'll have x equals 4. So that's one of our answers. The other one, we're going to take the second expression, x minus 10, and set it equal to 0. And we can see, okay, we can add the 10 over, so x equals 10. So there you go. I guess we're going to use rainbow here to box them. All right, so x equals 4 and x equals 10. X equals 4 and x equals 10. So there's our two answers. So try number 9 and number 7 on your own. Number 7's already got everything on the right side for you, equals 0. So you can go ahead and factor that. Number 9, it looks like you need to add this x squared over and subtract this 4x, and then you'll be good to go for the factoring. But yeah, that's pretty much this lesson. So just remember 3 different ways to solve quadratic functions or quadratic equations. We can use graphing, we can use square roots, or we can use factoring. All right, graphing, square roots, and factoring. Guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Leave it in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Take it easy.